I am Nurse Ida Thwaites of the Voluntary Aid Detachment, and I should be, I suppose, in the nurses' mess, having a quick sherry to celebrate Christmas 1916. But I'm not. I'm out here, in the trenches, staring out into no man's land. I suppose I'm hoping for a miracle, like the one in 1914. I came out here right at the start of the war. It'll all be over by Christmas, that's what we thought, and how many times have I heard that since? Too many. But we didn't know that then. We never thought this would drag on and on like a great filthy machine, one that grinds up young boys with bullets and shells and breathes filthy mustard gas on them, leaving them to drown on dry land. I came out with my boy. Listen to me, my boy. I mean, my man, my husband. Well, he's been all of them to me as my Johnny. Knew him since we were nippers, and when he signed up with his friends to fight the Germans, I did too. Not to fight, obviously. They looked so fancy, the Pals battalions, that's what they called them. The whole of Chesterfield were there, either marching out on their way to war or standing in the roads, cheering them. Quite the jaunt they all thought it would be. Not me, though. I thought to myself, I'll be damned if I'm letting my Johnny loose around all those French girls. Well, you know what they're like. So I joined the Voluntary Aid Detachment as a nurse right off the bat. Took me several months to get myself out here, but I made it eventually. There's not many pals left alive now. Most of them are out there, see. Men I've known, and men I've treated, rotting in the mud. But I'm not here for them. Not today. Today I'm waiting for a miracle. Today I'm waiting for a candle. I'm waiting for 1914 to happen again. You see, in 1914 it were different. There weren't as much hate, not as many had died, and them that were in command weren't as full as blood and bluster. At least that's how they seemed to me. Well, it all started Christmas Eve morning. I was on shift at the hospital. We were busy as there'd been a big artillery barrage that night, the last as they were having before the ceasefire over Christmas. And who should turn up but Johnny? He's there with Moses Braithwaite, big, simple lug. And they've got a stretcher between them filled with body parts. Half of them look weeks old, and Johnny's grinning a big grin, and he says, I wanted to see you, Ida. Ah, I thought, that explains the stretcher. Using it to sneak off, you daft get. They shoot you for stuff like that, you know, Johnny. Anyway, he says, a curious thing happened that morning. Me and Moses, he says, we were on watch when we hear a German shout and something comes sailing into the trench. Grenade, Ida. That's what I thought, he says. That's our number up, I thought, he says. And Moses repeats it. Our number up, he says. That's David. Except, Ida, says Johnny, it weren't a grenade at all, it were a cake. See, and not a nice cake, he says. And I believe him, because you can't expect a German to make a good cake, and they know nought about puddings. But still, it were a cake, and a perfectly eatable one, apart from the taste. And that's why Johnny and Moses Braithwaite had come back to the hospital with the bits of all those poor boys on a stretcher. They wanted a cake to throw back to the Germans, and it was muggins here that they expected to give up her ration. And I did. Of course I did. Never could say no to him. He could talk the feathers off a bird, could my Johnny. Anyway, later I snuck down to the trenches, and you'll never guess what I heard. Carols. The Germans were singing carols. In German like, but even in German I could recognise Silent Night, and so can our Johnny, though for God's sake don't ask him to try and sing it. Johnny had always been an awful singer. Moses Braithwaite, though, oh, that boy might not have had a sensible thought in his head, but he had the voice of an angel. He's dead now, Moses. Another pal gone, and we can't even blame the Germans for this one. God knows they tried, though. No, it was us who shot Moses Braithwaite. As a coward. Court-martialed him. And he probably didn't even know what was going on. He weren't no coward. Poor lamb had lost what little mind he had. Ran out into no man's land one day, soon after Johnny died. Kept saying he had to get his friend back, and I think half of Germany opened fire on him, but God knows how he came back safe. He were carrying half an arm. Hand to elbow, he said it was his friend and he were hurt. They had to prise it out of his hands. He had big hands, did Moses, like shovels, dirt all ingrained in his nails. He never can get rid of the dirt here. Coward indeed. You didn't have to be a nurse to see he'd lost his marbles. We'd fix him up, he'd go back to the trenches, and the second no one was watching, he'd be back out in no man's land trying to bring back his friend. And eventually some officer, who'd probably had enough of Moses, said he were trying to desert. Well, the Germans might have missed him with every bullet they fired, but our firing squad didn't. And now he's gone. But that were after. That were all after the singing and the carols, and that were after Christmas 1914. We all listened to the carols, and then more cake were thrown from them to us and vice versa, and then other stuff starts being thrown. You see, gifts, small gifts, cigarettes and such like. Everyone smokes in the trenches, it helps hide the stink, and we never have enough tobacco. Next up, jokes. Johnny did his best to make sure I didn't hear him. He didn't want to offend a lady. He sent me back to the infirmary. Oh, Johnny, I'm a nurse, for God's sake. What does he think he's protecting me from? I've become quite the woman of the world since I came here to the Western Front. Anyway, when it was dark, I snuck back down to the trenches to see Johnny. And the Germans were singing again, and our boys were singing too, and the artillery on both sides had stopped. You don't realise until it stops how noisy it is. You get used to the noise, day and night, boom, boom, boom. Made it peaceful that night, almost magical. And that was when I saw it, far away through the barbed wire, something glimmering, a single bright white light. And no one lets a light show in the trenches. No one. There's snipers everywhere, just waiting for that light, that head that shows over the trench, someone who carelessly lights a cigarette. 1 minute you're talking to a pal, and next, bang, you're dead. Sudden like. But there were a light on the German side, and it was downright strange. Then there was another. Look, Johnny, I says. Johnny, look! And he does, and by the time he does, there's loads of lights. And I realise what they are. Candles. Hundreds of them all along the German line. And then, oh, it was funny, and you don't expect funny, but a Christmas tree appeared. Only a little one. You could just make it out, but it was being held up and waved above the trench. And we hear this shout. Hello, Tommy! And Johnny shouts back. Hello, Fritz! Merry Christmas, Tommy! Merry Christmas, Fritz! And there's this German and he's waving his little tree and I can hear laughter all up and down our trenches. It's the funniest thing I think I've ever seen. Merry Christmas, we all shout back. I'm coming out, shouts this German, and Johnny shouts back, oh, I'm coming out too. Oh, my Lord. We knew it weren't a trick. I can't tell you how we knew, but we just knew. And then Johnny grabs a lantern and he's out in the trench, and so is this German, and men on both sides are walking through the mud and pushing aside the wire so they can get to each other. And this German, I can still see him in my mind's eye. He had "Got Mittens" written on his belt. Johnny read it out loud. Got mittens, he said, all confused. And then he shouts, I have. Then he took off his mittens and he threw them to the German, and the German thought this was the funniest thing ever. He couldn't stop laughing. Oh. We buried the dead first. Theirs and ours. Those we could recognise we named, and those we couldn't, well, a reminder we all end up the same way in the end. Our vicar and the German vicar, whatever they called them anyway, they did a sermon together. I suppose the Bible's the same whatever language you speak. There were all these lads stood in the candlelight, heads bowed, some of them crying, and they said their goodbye to their friends. And Moses Braithwaite sang something in Latin. Beautiful it was. But later, when we passed round canteens full of something a bit stronger than tea, everyone were laughing and smiling. Men were shaking hands, looking at photographs of each other's girls, some of them hugging like they've been friends forever, and remember then that we are all the same alive too. Goodness, we got so drunk. All of us, officers, boys, quite a few nurses turned up too from both sides. I got talking to a German nurse till she went off to do some fraternising of her own. We exchanged gifts too. Johnny came back with one of those pointy German helmets, and he ended up cleaning the latrines for a month for losing his own helmet. In 1915, they told us there was to be no fraternising with the enemy. We did, though. Well, some of us, a bit. But it wasn't the same. We were smaller somehow, and the men, they just weren't as comfortable with each other. And me, I didn't go over because it was too soon, see. It's just a week since Johnny, since he were killed, you see. Too much. It was too much just then, but I regretted it later. Still regret it now, and that's why I'm here now, see. I'm looking for a candle. I know it's been a darker time this year, so many dead, and they just keep mounting. The Battle of the Somme. Sometimes now I think of the Germans as monsters, not men. We all do, even though I try not to, but it is Christmas. Wait, did you see that? Was that a light? I thought I saw a light out there in the trenches, but no, it was nothing. Got mittens. Got mittens. It means God be with us. And he was that night in 1914. It really felt like he was. I don't think he's been back though. Not even at Christmas.